Hello my dear friends, I am back with a new story. The reason why I wasn't able to post new videos is because I have many family problems. If you remember, I told you guys I got hit by the car, still recovering, and now my mother has been diagnosed with a tumor, and this has been an incredibly challenging time for my family and me. As her primary caregiver, I needed to be by her side to offer support and assistance during this difficult period. I appreciate your understanding and support during this time. Now let's start our story. The story starts in the morning and everyone seems happy. Our main female protagonist name, Sylvia. She couldn't stand it because she enjoyed opening her eyes every morning to such royal-like service. It was so easy and fun to manage people with just your fingertips. She just smiled kindly, and the people would praise her. She was even criticized for being frugal, even if she was so luxurious. However, soon after, a face that was not welcome appeared in front of her. Her eyes that had lived to see only the beautiful things for the past month were dimmed because of the man. There were occasional beggars who would come to the castle, but how did this one avoid the guards, and came in to beg? Sylvia did not panic and showed mercy. She said, "Please feed this man properly and send him away." The man's fierce eyes pierced through his black hair that was drooping like seaweed all over his forehead. His firmly closed lips had no sign of going up. Even at first glance, he looked dissatisfied. Realizing what the man wanted, Sylvia laughed dismissively. "I'll give you new clothes. Both lower and upper sets," she shouted with feigned generosity. The maid, who had been stiff from before, opened her mouth carefully. "Madam, he is the Duke." The hand that has been fanning herself softly stopped. Sylvia blinked slowly. She looked at the man up and down. She belatedly noticed why she felt the original rejection. Scattered hair covered half of his face, armor that was lacquered with dried blood and grass debris, and a sword hanging on the man's waist. Above all, Sylvia was forced to admit the fishy scent of blood that pierced her nose. This man did not come to beg. Her head, which seemed to have stopped for a moment, turned rapidly and recovered to being witty and shameless. She spoke nervously. "I mean, are you the Duke, the true owner of this castle, my love, my Duke?" He finally returned. "Let's have a toast. Everyone, welcome the Duke," with a full display of joy and respect. And now begins the shameless acting. Bang! Bang! I heard the sound of thunderbolts in the dry sky. I wanted to find true peace here now, but there is no eternal happiness. Sylvia only enjoyed a month of peace, and the true owner of the Duke Castle has returned. Duke Victor Aswan. He was a man of low birth that was given a position as the Duke because of his killing powers. In the Pritra Empire he was very famous. When his name was called out, the child who was weeping stopped crying, and the drunkard who was acting badly would turn sober. I'm going to visit the inner chamber of the Duke of Aswan tonight. His name was a severe curse commonly used among the nobles. War fanatic killer Duke. Sylvia thought so as well, until she saw him, and it was true to appearance. Victor Aswan was a very scary man. His whole body seemed hard as a weapon, made to slaughter all. If a strong young man is hit by his fist, he won't be able to get up from the bed for at least 3 days or 4 days. However, there was a rumor that the Duke was ugly. I heard that there was a long scar on his cheek, but there wasn't. His hair, which was covered by blood and dirt, looked a little dirty, but his nose was straight and his skin was smooth. In fact, there was not much to see to accurately judge his appearance. Victor's face was half covered by his dirty shaggy hair. Sylvia did not try to look too closely at his face, she just gently laid her eyes down. In all circumstances, she was still resolute, but sadly, her throat was dry. She had to think about how to survive. Because the owner of the Duke Castle is Victor Aswan. Victor somehow didn't question Sylvia's status. I knew I had to get him out of his anger right away, but instead, he didn't say anything and just headed straight to all. Seeing that he was not surprised, he seemed to have heard the news about Sylvia even before he entered the country. Sylvia looked for the possibilities. Maybe Victor likes her. He likes her pretty face, so he wasn't upset even though she pretended to be his wife all this time. I blew away the first possibility and thought more for a while. Sylvia thought for a moment, and blew off the first possibility. Victor didn't seem to be interested in her at all. He was soaked in blood and smelled like a peasant, and he ate rice without even taking a bath. I want to look like a good cooperating friendly woman, but I can't eat like that. Victor put the thick steak in his mouth without cutting it properly. He didn't make any noise, but he didn't look very elegant either. The silver tableware that Sylvia used was just too small in his hand. Sylvia measured other possibilities. The reason why Duke Victor Aswan did not drive the intruder who had been crashing inside the Duke Castle is. Maybe it's because he doesn't have to drive me out. In fact, Sylvia's presence wasn't a loss for Victor. She was mostly a kind hostess. I got it. She was an externally benevolent hostess. In addition, thanks to the love story Sylvia made up, Victor's reputation for having a cruel image has also improved a lot. Victor Aswan is the current duke, but his birth itself was lowly. He was an orphan from the street, who didn't know who his parents were. He was picked up as an escort after the prince accidentally left the temple, but he did not receive any formal education related to academics. What Victor learned was only his ability to kill. He was rumored to be ignorant and ugly in appearance, so the aristocratic women did not want to marry him. Thanks to this, Victor was not popular in the marriage market, even though he is the Duke of the Empire. His age was already 27, well past the age of marriage. Sylvia finally came to the conclusion that he just wanted a wife. Maybe the two of them can become good partners. Duke Victor Aswan needs a woman to overcome his flaws, and Sylvia Loren needs a place to stay. All calculations were done in less than 5 minutes in her head. She didn't want to get out on her own unless she was kicked out. Then Victor spoke. You said you were pregnant with my baby. Sylvia was very surprised by the sudden question. Victor's voice was deeper than I thought. His appearance was huge like a mountain that could trample an enemy flat, but his voice was as soft and gentle as that of a poet. That's what happened, she replied. He continued, boy or girl? She was startled and she said, you'll only know when they are born. When will they be born? He asked. She replied in an angry tone, it's only been a month since I came here. For a month, he repeated. Victor's lips rose asymmetrically. It felt strange for someone who never laughed before. Sylvia's sneering appearance offended him. He again opened his mouth and said, be sure to give birth. Yes, she replied. He continued, make sure you have a smooth birth. Yes, thank you. Sylvia, who had to cut his thick meat 3 times her portion to take one bite, jumped up from her seat as he suddenly got up. Sylvia, who had been atrophied for a while, flinched. Then Victor spoke to all the maids as he left the dining hall. Don't ever let her miscarriage. Victor glanced at Sylvia. If my child is gone, all of you will die. Under his shaggy bangs, his thick lips were smirking. Sylvia's fine eyebrows were slightly frowned. He was making fun of her. But he still had the upper hand. Then Sylvia went to the room and was worried about what will happen next. She thought about leaving the room, so she opened the door but. Suddenly Victor came. He then spoke. If you have nowhere else to go, you can stay. Sylvia flinched. I pretended to work on my embroidery, but in fact all of my attention was on him. She glanced at Victor with the corner of her eyes. Victor was lying on the bed looking at the ceiling. Sylvia thought that she should throw the bed right away as soon as he leaves again. He was lying on the bed without taking a shower first. It was a room that I never felt was as small before when using it alone. But when Victor came in, she felt choked. He was too big. Sylvia felt sorry for the soft, high-quality bedsheets under Victor's enormous muddy body. If you don't have a home, stay here. Sylvia felt offended by that laughing mocking voice, but she didn't want to lose this golden opportunity. She replied, you are kind. After saying thank you with a pretense smile, she once again pretended to be engrossed in her embroidery work. I didn't want to exchange any more words with Victor. Sylvia grieved that she had to sleep with Victor in the same room. There are many eyes looking at the Duke Castle, so other rooms cannot be used at all. Since the two are married, it was natural to use the same room. It is natural for the people involved to think that way, but it was very upsetting to Sylvia that Victor Aswan also thought so. He proudly entered her room and took over her bed. He then asked, "What's your name?" "It's Sylvia Lauren." She replied. "It's wrong. It should be Sylvia Aswan. If you want to pretend, do it right." Sylvia's face twitched. She was thankful to him for not chasing her out, but he strangely irritated people's nerves. She stabbed the needle through the embroidery fabric, imagining that it was Victor's shoulder. She accidentally hurt herself and blood began to drip. Victor came for her rescue. He grabbed her hand and broke the wooden embroidery frame with his one hand, and used the cloth to stop her bleeding. He then spoke, "I've seen enough blood out on the battlefield. There's no need to see more in my bedchamber." She was startled. She saw her broken frame and cried in her heart. He asked, "How long have you been in my castle?" "It's only been a month," she replied. He continued, "There were no suitable amenities in the household." Sylvia stopped. "Is it ironic that I use the Duke's budget to buy dresses and accessories?" She took a quick glance, but she couldn't see his expression because it was covered by his thick hair. He spoke, "You don't need to work in person since you are my wife by name now." Sylvia was relieved that he did not point out her spending his resources. She moved her hand on the needle again. She was pretending to be the Duchess, but she had no intention of doing her duty. Household work could be done by hiring a professional manager. Even when Victor was away, the Duke household was operating like that. He continued, "Do you know how to read?" Sylvia's natural sixth sense was triggered. If she reveals that she knows what to do here, something annoying will happen in the future. She has to pretend not to know, pretend that she doesn't know how to do it. She closed her eyes and smiled lightly. She replied, "No, sadly, I am illiterate." "Learn." He spoke. She continued, "I'm sorry, but I have a hard head. Every teacher who taught me before had no choice but to give up on me." "Learn." He spoke. She said, "In this world, there are things that you can't do anything about." "Learn." He repeated again. Sylvia glared at him. He said, "You can do it." "Let it be." She replied. "Because it's beyond your abilities." He teased. "Try it." Victor laughed as he added, "While I kill people, my wife learns to write. Shouldn't we have to pay the price for free meals for using someone else's last name?" Sylvia's stomach boiled with frustration. Victor was not friendly to her at all. "No, I have to struggle." Her stepmother and younger sister who brazenly used her were already gone from her life. But this man pretended to be good and tried to use her. It's happening all over again. Sylvia comforted the fact that he would soon return. Anyway again. After a few years he won't come back. If you still don't know how to read when I come back. He lowered his voice in a threatening momentum. Sylvia swallowed subconsciously. It would be better not to imagine the future. With those words, Victor turned to his side of the bed, finishing the conversation. It seems to be a topic closed for discussion. Sylvia glared at Victor's wide back. "I'm really lucky." The Duke put himself in a high-pressure stance as if he had no idea how to talk to a woman. If not, Sylvia wouldn't have been a modest wife, and would pretend to be a noble. "I thought, if that was the case, he wouldn't have told me to go to work. But it was an extreme job as it was." She thought, "I should play the role of seduction, but I couldn't imagine myself screaming under that heavy body. It's unfortunate, but what can I do? He has the upper hand in this all. It was fortunate that the owner didn't drive me away." She sighed. Sylvia reminisces about her past life. Her father was a womanizer. He gambled all wealth and spent all family wealth and was in debt. And eventually he had to pay the debt by his life. She felt sorry for the stepmother, because she married such a man, who was noble just by the name. So Sylvia thought she should be a good stepdaughter. But her stepmother was a bitch, who this whole time gives Sylvia a hard time. Sylvia does all the house chores, yet her stepmother doesn't give her proper food. Her stepmother always tries to make Sylvia feel guilty for nothing. Her stepsister is a pain in her ass. Sylvia's stepsister is Brat, who is good for nothing. She always creates problems for Sylvia. Her stepmother complains that they don't have any money, but she and her daughter eat like a pig. Before passing, Sylvia's mother told her, "Be kind to others. That's the key to winning." And Sylvia always tried her best to be a good daughter. One day Sylvia's stepmother introduced Sylvia to an old man. The old man proposed to Sylvia. On that day Sylvia had enough. She smiled and thought, "How dare she try to sell me off to a bald, old man?" She went back to her room and packed her back, but then her stepsister came and asked, "Are you leaving? How am I supposed to live without you?" Sylvia got up and spoke, "Now you are your own, and I know you are afraid of losing your personal maid." Sylvia left the house. She pledged to herself that, from now she will never ever let anyone take advantage of me again, ever again. She proudly left the house but had nowhere to go. She doesn't have enough for that. She can stay at the inn and purchase the food. There are only two ways for a young, single lady from a humble family to survive. Become the second wife of an old, wealthy man. Or make petty cash doing petty chores. Although, I'm in no place to really pick and choose right now. Did I finally get away from my house only to become a maid? There must be some other. Then suddenly a newspaper boy came running. He shouts, "Breaking news. Read all about it. The Duke has slaughtered the enemy's army." People who were reading the news muttered, "Who? He slaughtered the whole army. He is definitely the devil incarnate." Sylvia turned her head, and muttered, "The Duke? Do they mean the war fanatic, Duke Victor Aswan? Then will the war be over soon? It doesn't seem likely. Duke Aswan has been at war for 7 years now. I doubt he will be returning anytime soon." At that moment Sylvia had a fantastic idea. She went straight to the Duke's mansion. There she told the main butler that she is Duke's lover. She saved Duke during war, and they both fell in love. To protect the woman he loves, the Duke sent her to his castle in the Priatra Empire. During her journey, she was once again under attack. She barely escaped from the enemies. And now finally she arrived at Duke's mansion. The butler hesitated a little bit. Sylvia knows he didn't believe her, so thought, he thinks that it's a ridiculous love story. But a good con artist can sell any nonsense. She spoke, "I understand if you don't believe me." She strokes her belly and continues to speak. "However, I am with his child. I am pregnant." Butler was so surprised, but he can't do anything. Sylvia had yet to reveal her ultimate card. She was wearing her mother's jewelry. But she told the butler that Duke gave this ring to her, and she also showed an fake marriage certificate, which was in foreign language. Seeing these all things, finally Butler was convinced that Sylvia and Duke married. He immediately gave maids order to get the room ready for new Duchess of the house. When Sylvia opened her eyes, she was already on the bed. She woke up in amazement. Last night she slept in a chair by the window. The thought of sleeping with him on the same bed was terrible by itself. So even if it was a little uncomfortable, I slept sitting in the chair. But why am I in bed? Maybe he moved me here. I hated just smelling him, and imagining that man's large hand touching my body while I was ignorant of it in my sleep. That wasn't really good either. She just decided she must have crawled into the bed while sleeping. Whatever helps her mind to be at ease. Sylvia left the room. The servants greeted her brightly, and Sylvia smiled lovingly and accepted it. By the time she went down the stairs on the first floor, Sylvia guessed that she may have had a nightmare. Everything was as peaceful as yesterday. Maybe she was trembling with anxiety about Victor Aswan's return, and then had a very reality-like dream, an inception. However, the appearance of Victor, staring at her with his strong momentum, was so vivid. I was so anxious thinking that he was still in the Duke's castle. Sylvia ran into a man coming out of the dining hall. Losing her center of gravity and staggering, the man caught her before she could fall. She looked up and lost her words. A man in an ivory shirt stood, giving off a constant atmosphere. His distinct features were chiseled like a well-crafted sculpture. His black hair was very short, and his thick lips were tightly closed. The man stared down at Sylvia. It was so intense that I thought it was not okay to do this in the first place. Sylvia's face blushed under his hot eyes. He said, I will go out in 30 minutes. Sylvia returned to her sanity as if she was poured down by cold water. The man in front of her was Victor Aswan. The voice is the same. Sylvia could describe Victor as a man with a good voice as well as a good face. This was terribly shocking. According to her preconceived notions, he should have been a little more ugly and rugged, but his appearance was very good. That Victor was a handsome man was not at all in her predictions. Sylvia belatedly noticed the color of his eyes. Even the pupils were bright blue. Her chest plummeted. I have never seen such an extremely handsome man in my 18 years of life. Unlike yesterday, Victor, who passed by, did not smell like blood now. Sylvia suddenly felt embarrassed by her thoughts that seemed to see him as a handsome, attractive man. She struggled to recall his cruel nature. He threatened her to study yesterday. Victor Aswan was a bit of a slayer. So, she shouldn't think of liking him. Victor in his new armor is the epitome of a majestic man. I was confident. Yesterday I was a beggar, but today I am a commander. Sylvia clearly took the fact that he was a war fanatic too seriously. It was good for her to come and bid farewell to her husband, outside the castle. The servants who came to see off the master gathered there too. It was time to start the play. Sylvia shook her handkerchief with a sad expression. Victor noticed that her handkerchief was not yellow. Yellow is a traditional color for this sort of stuff maybe. Seems like you are wishing for me to not come back. She was flustered. She spoke. No way. I had one set of colors, but I used them all to pray for the Duke to come back. Her smile at the corner of her mouth trembled. Victor curled his lips in a mysterious smile. He spoke, I must come back right away. She said, don't overdo it, just don't die. Duke, you know my heart. Every employee of the Duke's castle watched Sylvia and Victor with curiosity. They were all looking forward to seeing how the Duke couple would romantically interact with each other. The carriage was already there, so she thought it was okay to act intimate for a few seconds, but Victor suddenly put his hand around her waist. Sylvia felt how big Victor was as he carried her weight, and it felt hard on her arms. He put his hand through her long hair and pulled it to himself. He craves something in this precarious situation. He covets her lips. Sylvia was startled and couldn't even close her eyes. The stranger's kiss was rude and rough. She felt as if she was swallowed by a hot fire. She desired more, in spite of herself, and Victor kissed her deeper in response. His passion was almost frightening. Sylvia's mind went numb. She knew very well that he was simply playing along with her act, but at that precise moment, she was craving him. No one but Victor. This vigorous man meant the whole world to her. Victor's kiss lasted until Sylvia tapped his chest to pause for breath. She panted. Victor's blue eyes darkened as he examined her. She looked back blankly, bewitched by what had happened. Her stomach tightened. Victor Aswan was a dangerous man. He always had been, ever since he had betrayed her expectations and returned from battle. Her audacity disappeared, and fear took its place. Don't forget what I said yesterday, Victor said, his eyes fixed on her. The rich, deep voice scratched her eardrums, and a sense of excitement ran through her body. What did you say? She said, tightening her jaw to suppress a moan. Study. What? You should leave now. Sylvia waved the handkerchief with one sincere wish. That Victor Aswan would die on the battlefield this time. That he would never come back to the castle. After 3 days of Victor's departure. In the morning Sylvia woke up and had a panicked attack. Her periods came before the time. I've had my period on time ever since I first started my period. Did it start because I was anxious? I've worked so hard to not let anyone find out I'm not pregnant. What should I do? She was trying to do something, then suddenly. A maid opens the door. My goodness, madam. The maid saw blood on the bed, so she panicked. Since Sylvia told everyone that she is pregnant, all maids thought that Sylvia had miscarriage. And now Duke is not gonna spare their life. They all were crying for their life. The head maid came to see the situation. She immediately shouts to call the doctor. But Sylvia stopped her and started shedding crocodile tears. She spoke, "No, don't call anyone. If Duke who is in the came to know what happened, he might be disheartened. As you are aware, he has a lot of enemies. They will use this to discourage him. And we can have another baby. But what if something happens to the Duke on the battlefield? When he's back at the castle after winning the war, then I will tell him about this tragedy myself. Can you please help me keep this a secret?" Sylvia was crying, and at the same time, she thought that Victor should not return. The head maid also sheds tears. "Don't you worry, madam, I will guard your secret. Even if it means sacrificing my own life. Forever, I promise." Sylvia replied, "Oh sure." And thought, was she always like this? The butler also came running and was crying like a baby. "Madam, I am so sorry. I should have cared more for you, I am terribly sorry." Sylvia was tensed because one after another everyone came to her and was shedding tears for no reason. "Don't be everyone, please don't worry about me and return to your work. This should not affect anyone. I will do my best in my position, and just as the Duke is doing his best by fighting for us on the front lines, I, too, shall do my best to recover." It was the performance of a lifetime, just as though a saint had come to life. Maid muttered, "What a benevolent Duchess." Sylvia was now tension-free. Now, this news won't reach Victor Aswan's ears. And there's no way he's returning from war just to kill all his servants. All the servants of the mansion were trying their best to cheer up Sylvia. Madam, I brought you some dessert. I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I brought a little bit of everything. I also brought you catalogs from the boutique on my way here. Choose as you please, madam." The chef came with some dish. "Madam, I have made special, nourishing dishes for you. And these are flowers from the gardener." Sylvia was happy, at the same time she was feeling guilty too. "Oh, my, they're the ones that I said were beautiful. All of you, they're so fragrant. Aren't they trying too hard? Now I feel bad." The maid spoke. "You are one of the kind, madam. And it's our honor to serve a great duchess such as yourself." "Oh, wow, I'm relieved to have you as well. Victor Aswan is happy killing people in battle. If I could just spend my whole life peacefully like this." Sylvia's days were going. But then one day a knight came with a flower. He told Sylvia that Duke sent this present for his dear duchess. By the time it reaches Sylvia, the flower was dead. She wasn't pleased to see him nor the flower. The soldier carried on. "I must have caught you off guard. I am a soldier from the Duke's army. It is a pleasure to finally meet you face to face, ma'am. Do you have any message to deliver to the Duke?" She thought, has the Duke gone crazy? Of course, I can't say that. He definitely knew the flower would wither on the way here. It is likely that he wanted to mess with me, but I am incredibly self-controlled. With a smile, she said, "Oh, my, please tell him I said thank you." She gave flowers to Marilyn. And spoke, "Would you water this beautiful flower? You must bring it back to life." The soldier spoke, "As I had imagined. A match made in heaven." The Duke predicted just that. He said that Madame would still say it's beautiful and be thankful for the withered flower. Niece. It's like what they say, great minds think alike. She groaned and clenched her fist. She thought, I can almost see the look on Victor Aswan's face when he said that. He asks, "Please let me know if you have any other messages. I will deliver them to the Duke upon my safe return." She gasped and spoke, "Oh, how sweet of you. Then, would you please tell the Duke?" She smiled, and thought, never come back. Just stay there. But she kept her thoughts to herself and spoke, "I am dying to know how he's doing there." The soldier spoke, "Nay, expected you would say that as well. So I wrote down his answer here." She was puzzled. "What are you saying?" He brought out a list of answers from his pocket. He began to speak. "While you're sleeping in a soft, comfortable bed, I have rolled like garbage covered in mud and dust. There are fleas there all over my body and I bed with roaches. But well, it's been like that for 7 years now, so don't worry." Is what he said. The perfect impersonation of Duke is so uncanny. She was terrified for a moment. She didn't lose her calm and spoke. "Oh, that answers all my questions. Now would you get rid of that look on your face?" And inquired, "Are there any other messages? Looks like he's enjoying this. Please tell him that I am wondering if he's eating well." The knight spoke. He also expected you would ask that. Hearing her face became even more gloomy, she thought. Just how much of what I say did he anticipate? What else is there? He took out a rotten potato. And spoke. "Here, take a look. This is the food the Duke normally eats." The maids who were standing behind spoke in disbelief. "My goodness, what is that? How on earth can you eat such a thing?" She was startled. How can Duke eat something like? The knight continued, "There were more, but I ate them on the way, haha." She knew what message Duke wanted to send. "I'm suffering like this in the battlefield. I guess that is what you want to say. But you don't know that I ate this kind of food all my life." She then grabbed the potato and spoke. "I have no problem with eating a potato like this." She took a bite. Everyone was startled by this. "Oh, madam, dear lord, don't eat that." She then realizes what she is doing. "I couldn't help myself. Anyway, I should turn this around. I'm all right. This is what the Duke has for his meals. I can't just let precious food go to waste. I wish to go through everything with him." "Madam." All the servants were touched by this. The knight then spoke. "Wow, this will really surprise the Duke when he hears it." She thought. "Yes, so there is something you haven't expected. I got you, haha." The knight began to depart, but then Sylvia asked, "Why don't you stay a little longer?" He spoke. "No, thank you. I got a vacation to visit my hometown as a reward." "Ah, the Duke told me to ask you. Is the baby in your womb doing well?" She smiled and spoke. "Please tell him there's nothing to worry about in this castle, except for his health. And tell him that I'm only wishing for his safe return." The knight replied, "Yes, madam, then I will certainly deliver that." The husband's return. Drat, he's back again. Sylvia, who had turned 19 this year, welcomed her husband with a graceful smile. It had been precisely 1 year. Victor's hair had grown longer, and his skin had gotten darker. But neither of those things impressed her. She was not at all glad to see him again. Victor's gaze fell on her flat belly. "It was a miscarriage due to stress," Sylvia said, lowering her head in misery. "I thought as much." Sylvia took out a handkerchief and softly dabbed her eyes. "This pain is unbearable. A boy or a girl? I wouldn't know. It happened too early on." "Understood," he replied quietly. Sylvia could not believe that her ears had caught a tone of loneliness in his voice. Is that grief? Is that empathy? From him, the war fanatic? With me? She was puzzled. To her surprise, Victor pulled her gently into his arms. Was he consoling her over the loss? It wasn't even real. She felt a twinge of guilt, which disappeared completely when the Duke whispered into her ears, "Have you studied?" Study." Sylvia's gritted her teeth as she put on a fake smile. Persistent bastard. How foolish of me to think that he cared about the baby. Sylvia decided to stay put. That he had returned was quite annoying, but he was to continue fighting in the war anyway. All she had to do was wait a few days. In other words, 3 to 4 days of pain would guarantee her the continued enjoyment of the pleasant lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. It was not a bad deal for her. An uncomfortable relationship was far better than wandering the streets, homeless. So Sylvia decided to stay put. "When is your next departure?" "There is no next departure." "Pardon." Her hands trembled in shock. Your Grace, what an amusing joke." She stammered. Victor snorted as he watched his wife panicking at his reply. "My wife must hate to have me here." "Of course not. I simply thought what a huge loss it is for the country to have a talented person like you stay home." "Which means you hate to have me here," Victor sneered. He brought a piece of steak out of his mouth. Blood dripped from the thick piece of meat. His taste for rare steak made him look more grotesque and ruthless. Their appetites were the exact opposite. Sylvia preferred vegetables to meat, and well done to rare. She resisted the urge to vomit and managed to beam. Absolutely not. Yet, how can a man do great deeds from home? I will always be a supportive wife. Do go out and conquer the world. The whole world is yours. Be an emperor, if you might. Are you instigating treason? We all have only one life to live. I see no difference between being being killed in war and executed for treason. What a curse you say, he said, dismissing even the slightest possibility of treason. Then die in war, you jackass. Sylvia did not appreciate his straight answer. If he were so loyal to his emperor, he ought to fight in another war, not settle down. The castle had experienced no problems under Sylvia's leadership while he had been away. She felt like she was the host and Victor Aswan was the guest and uninvited one. It seemed the tail was wagging the dog, but she had already gotten herself accustomed to the castle. And more importantly, the castle did not need two masters. Will you go back to war, someday? Sylvia's long eyelashes fluttered. Victor seemed to pity her as she desperately held onto a frail hope. So he answered her question truthfully. This is a period of rest. For how long, if I may ask? 1 month. Sylvia's face quickly darkened. A month. That was too long. But on second thought, it was a finite period. 1 month was tolerable. The time would fly. She tried her best to cheer herself up. Living with a strange man was more uncomfortable than she had thought. Though she could put up with sharing a bed, albeit not easily, she could not bear the new task she had been charged with. She now had to do her wifely duty by Victor. This meant the servants ran every matter concerning Victor through her. Victor asked Sylvia, you can also sleep, I wouldn't bite you. Sylvia turned around and saw a beautiful big sturdy chest of handsome Victor. She was flustered, so she turned around her head and said, it's okay. I am all right. Victor then got up and spoke. Planning on rolling around on the couch like last time? What did you say? She asked. He continued, guess you didn't know that I carried you to the bed myself when you were dangling off the couch. She already knew that it was him, but she wanted to deny the fact, but now finally, he told her. So it was he carried me that day. She gets even more annoyed when he speaks. I'm more comfortable here, she thought. I don't know what you'll do to me in bed. He speaks. Disrupted my sleep with all the groaning. She replied, I do not recall. He asked, you are sleeping on the couch for a month? Yes, she replied. He continued, you are saying I won't be able to sleep from hearing your groans for a whole month? She again replied, yes. Now Victor leaned towards Sylvia and then spoke. Then, I shall carry you to bed every night. She got flustered and stood up. I'll go lie down. I'll go. She ran towards the bed and lay down. She spoke, I won't take you for a ruffian who would touch a girl while she's sleeping. Victor then spoke. I didn't know you thought so little of me. She continued, I said I won't take you for one. Victor then came close to Sylvia. She saw him coming close. What? That's closer than I thought. Hold on. Her heart thumped. She thought, I can't just get pulled in like this. She pushed him. All right. You want to do this? She opened his rope. Surprised. You thought I'd be scared. You're deeply mistaken if you thought I'd be swayed however you want. Victor stopped Sylvia, and got up. Sylvia was so flustered she didn't know what to do. Victor was silent this whole time. Then suddenly he laid her down. She thought the shiver ran down my spine. But he did absolutely nothing. He spoke where you were expecting something. Instead of doing something, he grabbed the pillow behind her. I will take this. And then he laid down too. For a moment she was blanked. Then suddenly she shouts, why are you taking my pillow? He responded, then from where will I get the pillow? She looked back and saw all the pillows were piled up behind her. Now that I think about it, this is where this war fanatic's been lying just now. She blushed and embarrassed. Victor saw her red face and asked, so you were expecting something after all? She opened her mouth and spoke. Expect what? I merely want a good night's sleep. He jokingly said, I won't take you for a thug who would touch me while I'm asleep. Sylvia lay down again and embarrassed. Now she is so flustered that she can't fall asleep. She started counting sheep, and went on a 672 sheep number. Finally she was able to sleep. In the morning when the sun rises up, She felt nice warm, soft stuff. She thought the pillow was too soft. Then suddenly she realized the texture of the pillow. She opened her eyes, and found herself lying on Victor. He didn't wake up her. So when she woke up, he spoke. "You're finally up. I was wondering when I'd be off from cushion duty." She immediately gets up and shouts. She asks, "What are you doing here?" But then he smirked, and calmly asked, "It's me who should ask this, not you. You thug." Though she could put up with sharing a bed, albeit not easily, she could not bear the new task she had been charged with. She now had to do her wifely duty by Victor. This meant the servants ran every matter concerning Victor through her, including those they had dealt with on their own before her arrival. "His Grace has informed us that he needs a uniform to wear at the palace next week. But the one tailored 8 years ago does not fit anymore." She could have carelessly said, "Call the tailor and make another one," but didn't. She was the warm-hearted Duchess. "Then we must make another one. I shall go to the shop and place an order myself. I would like to check on the latest trends in high society. Of course, the Duke will wear any outfit I recommend, but an outdated style would not be appropriate, would it?" Victor would have worn rags if they were from Sylvia. He had no opinions on clothes. It was not clear if the lack of interest was due to the wars or his innate personality. He lay down on the bed in dirty clothes and never complained about the quality. In any case, she was fortunate that his tastes were not particular. If he had been a fastidious nobleman who knew his liking very well, it would have been difficult for Sylvia to handle. Ready to go out, Sylvia headed to the drill hall where Victor was thought to be. She wouldn't have done so had it not been for the servants who were wondering why she was not saying goodbye to Victor. She was wearing a sophisticated feather hat that she hadn't taken out for a while, along with a fabulous lace dress. Of course, she had an essential item for a noble lady. Victor stared at her without saying a word. His scrutinizing eyes made her blush. "So those were bought with my money. The feather hat from the neck of an enemy soldier, and the dress from the arms of an enemy commander, I should say. You needn't explain. I am well aware of your endeavors. And the pearl necklace from the arrow that pierced my shoulder." "You are being mean," she said, covering her mouth with her fan and letting out a high-pitched laugh. "I'm going out to purchase you a tailcoat." Sylvia scurried out of the hall immediately upon finishing her sentence. Confronting this enormous man was too demanding. He was never without his sword, which indicated his brutality. Just yesterday, he went out hunting and brought home a dead bear. Everyone in the castle had shivered in fear at the red blood splattered all over his body and at his blue blazing eyes. And when he had held out a dead rabbit as a gift for her, she had nearly fainted. The poor creature had been dangling from his hand by its ears. As Sylvia hurried away, Victor shouted after her, "Do you know my size?" Sylvia pretended she hadn't heard anything and continued walking. Then she heard footsteps right behind her, and her shoulders were caught. It didn't take much effort for this tall man to catch up with her. "Oh, did you say something? You have bad ears. Or you have a small voice. I asked if you knew my size. I'm only going to choose the design and the fabric. The tailor will later come to the castle and measure you up. There is no need to do things the long way. We'll finish the measurements today." What Victor was saying was that he would be joining her on her excursion. Sylvia threw him a sour glance. He was sweating from the training, and his hands gave off the sharp smell of resin. Most importantly, no matter how thoroughly he would clean himself, the lingering air of death would never leave his body. Sylvia didn't want him to follow her. Walking with this formidable man would draw unwanted attention. "Then will you go by yourself?" "We'll go together. In 30 minutes. Victor trudged out of the hall to take a shower. Sylvia stood there alone, a bit startled actually. She had thought he had no sense of hygiene. He had always been covered with sweat and muck but never seemed to care. At least she would not have to suffer the unpleasant odor today. The news about the Duke and Duchess's date spread fast across the castle. The maid rearranged Sylvia's long blonde hair. She plaited it into a bun and pulled out a couple strands of curly hair on each side. With puffs from 2 different bottles of perfume, Sylvia was good to go. The whole process of getting dressed up was embarrassing. Though it definitely looked like one, this was not a date. They were merely going out to buy some clothes. At the same time, this was an opportunity. The closer people thought they were, the bigger the benefit would be for her. Sylvia would appear to be a wise lady who had tamed the frightful man, and the servants would respect Sylvia as much as they feared Victor. "You must be delighted to be going out with his grace, madam," said a freckled young maid in a shaky voice. She seemed astounded that her war-maniac master was capable of taking a stroll with his wife. Sylvia smiled. "The Duke promised to buy me my favorite cinnamon sugar candy. Those are very sweet." "How romantic." "Yes, he is." Sylvia stood up from her chair, smiling with her eyes. Cinnamon sugar candy? Not in a million years. He would never do such a thing for Sylvia. What did he know about her anyway? He couldn't even know that she liked cinnamon. The horseman received a bunch of flowers from the gardener to decorate the carriage, which Sylvia could not stop. He seemed to believe that this would please the kind Duchess. On her way out, she spotted Victor waiting for her on the first floor. Sylvia was lost for words. In a loose ivory shirt, first 2 buttons undone, and cotton trousers, he resembled a free-spirited wanderer, not a murderer. Who would ever imagine that he is the deranged war maniac? She thought. He did not look so cruel without the sword on his waist. The big, masculine body was still intimidating, but all in all, he looked fine. He would be able to blend smoothly into the crowd. She didn't have to worry anymore about his terrorizing other people. Sylvia found it strange that he didn't bring his sword, which he treated as an extension of himself. But soon, she remembered that he had once killed a bear bare-handedly. No one in the Prietra Empire would dare stand against this man. "I hope you enjoy your date, Your Grace." "Thank you, dear. You have a wonderful day yourself, too," said Sylvia. Sylvia naturally locked arms with Victor, which made him laugh quietly. She was offended but didn't stop walking. This insult would last for a moment, but her happiness would last forever. The carriage was uncomfortable. The spacious interior was not nearly big enough to comfortably accommodate Victor. At first, Sylvia attempted to avoid any physical contact with the Duke, but she failed miserably as her knees brushed against his no matter her posture. "What am I doing? I'm already sharing the bed," she thought. After all, he did not have any contagious diseases. She decided it would be okay for their legs to brush. However, she could not keep her calm, sitting face to face with him. Her heart pounded as she looked him in the eyes, a physical response that she did not welcome. She closed her eyes, pretending to be tired, but could still feel his eyes boring in hers. She could not figure out whether he liked her or disliked her, and that mystery tormented her. Surprisingly, Victor held out his hand to help Sylvia down from the carriage. It had never occurred to her that all out with a sword could have the manners of a gentleman. His hand was rough with calluses. She imagined the amount of blood that had been on them and she shuddered. But there was a suitable excuse to refuse the kind gesture. She reluctantly placed her hand on his. It was hot. Do all men have as high a temperature? She wondered, stepping down. She headed straight to the clothing store, no desire whatsoever to saunter through the streets with Victor. All she wanted was to finish their task as soon as possible and return home. "Your Grace," the clerk welcomed her, after which she saw the man standing next to Sylvia and took a step back in fear. Victor was much taller than the average man in the Empire. Sylvia smiled brightly. "We would like to order a suit for this gentleman here. The trendiest one, I mean." The clerk left to bring a tape measure. She wondered who the man was but suppressed her curiosity immediately. Fidelity was not a common virtue in the world of the nobility, and many noblewomen refused to disclose the identity of their companions. She presumed Sylvia was one such noblewoman. Sylvia was wise not to reveal her full name. She visited downtown frequently but never carried any items that could link her to Aswan Castle. All purchases were made in cash, and if it took time to manufacture an item, she would send a servant to pick it up instead of having it delivered to the castle. She knew all too well that her relationship with Victor Aswan would be nothing but a disadvantage to her. The responses she would get would be some combination of suspicion, pity, fear, or misgivings. Victor was a taciturn man. Whereas his eyes smoldered, he rarely opened his mouth, which was fortunate for Sylvia. It was unnecessary to terrify people. If we start today, the suit will be ready in 3 days. Excellent. I will send someone on that day. Victor didn't intervene in a conversation about his own clothes. He had very normal tastes. She was pleased that the shopping was concluded so easily. I need shoes, too. Shoes? She asked back in surprise, then nodded in agreement. He was correct. It'd be ridiculous to wear combat boots with a fine suit. So she had to make one more stop before returning to the castle, but it wasn't bothersome at all. It had been a long time since her last trip downtown. The shoe shopping went well, too. She simply pointed at a pair of unadorned leather shoes, and he nodded. While the clerk packed the shoes in a box, Sylvia's eyes darted around the shop and settled on one spot. The shiny brown women's shoes had pointy toes, reflecting the latest trend. Having seen how she had gotten dazzled by them, Victor said to the clerk, "Pack those, too." Sylvia blinked. The kindness was unexpected. "Thank you." She smiled. She never refused a gift. And buying her own goods with his money was something she had consistently done during the past year. She exited the shop, humming with joy. The cool, gentle breeze added to her merriment. She felt the need to revise her impression of him slightly. He was not petty or evil, rather, he was quite generous with money. Sylvia suddenly noticed how fine a man he was. Across the entire downtown, no man had shoulders as vast as his, or thighs as sturdy as his. She would be in no danger as long as she was with him. He was somewhat reliable. Victor Aswan. During 8 years of war, his reputation had plummeted further and further. His face had become monstrous in the rumors as no one had seen his real face. "I heard he has scars on both cheeks." "No, I heard half his face has been burned away." "No, he only has one eye." Sylvia wondered how they would react once they found out this man walking next to her was the Victor Aswan. Without the untidy hair and armor, he was handsome. They bumped into a man at the corner of an alley. "Oh, Sylvia," the man said cheerfully. Sylvia also recognized him and said with a smile, "How have you been, James?" James was someone she had met in a bookstore. They had reached for the same book, and he had suggested she take it. All they knew about each other was first names, but that was enough for them to exchange warm greetings in the street. Their similar taste in books helped them speak the same language. "The book you let me take the other day, it was a fun read. If you haven't found another one, would you like to borrow mine? I appreciate the offer, but I'm good. I was able to buy it elsewhere. As you said, it was interesting indeed. Are you aware that the author has released a new book?" "Is that so? I didn't know. I must look for it." Immersed in this pleasant conversation with James, Sylvia forgot entirely about Victor. He was too quiet, and she was too happy. Only when James asked about him did she realize Victor had been there the whole time. "By the way, who is this gentleman?" James asked, looking frightened. What could possibly make him this nervous? James was as pale as if he were facing a ghost. "He's my husband, Victor Aswan," Victor answered in a deeper tone than usual, and held out his hand. Sylvia frowned. He had no reason to say his name. The name, Victor Aswan, was not common in the Empire. So it was only natural that James shivered pathetically and ran away in a hurry. "What did you do to him?" Sylvia murmured, watching James run as if his butt were on fire. The thing was, gentlemen never ran. They retained their poise even in emergencies. That James, a peaceful book lover, would run away like that proved once again that Victor was pure evil. "He must not have known you were married." "Well, he didn't ask." "Then you must have passed or tried to pass as unmarried." "I do not have to answer an unasked question. Likewise, it was unnecessary for you to reveal your full name. I will buy you a large diamond ring." "Diamond ring? A ring? I beheaded several enemies just recently. We must celebrate." Victor walked past her with a smirk on his face. Sylvia followed, clueless as to what he had meant. He seemed to be in a bad mood, but she didn't care as she had no reason to decline a gift. She was determined to choose the biggest, the most beautiful diamond in the shop. Are you pleased? Extremely. Throughout their journey back home, Sylvia could not take her eyes off the ring placed on her ring finger. It looked magnificent from every angle. The diamond, slightly bigger than her thumbnail, had cost him a great fortune. Though she had been using his money without restraint, she hadn't purchased a diamond ring yet, believing it would be premature to go that far. This was all very surreal. Her instinct told her that she would adore this precious ring for the rest of her life. It was the most expensive item she owned. I come from a poor family. I have never worn a diamond ring before. This is beautiful. The day with Victor was not miserable. She had feared something hair-raising would happen, but it was not as bad as she had thought. He was not chatty or picky. And he bought loads of snacks for her, to the point that she was too full to have dinner. Instead of her favorite cinnamon sugar candy, she had the chance to taste all sorts of heavenly ice creams and tarts. He was calmer than she had thought. His way of speaking sounded sarcastic by nature, but there was no real malice in it. Truly, he was better than she had thought. Then I thought. She kept on adding this phrase at the end. It was time she pondered what she really thought of him. War fanatic, cruel, slaughterer, butcher, monster. The words that described him were awfully barbaric. He represented everything that was horrific and inhumane. But without the sword and filthy clothes, he was as ordinary as any other man in the street. People would not have recognized him if he hadn't revealed his name. What is it that makes him so frightening? She then realized it was the exaggerated rumors that created this image. He was not as peculiar as Shahad imagined. He was, in fact, close to her ideal type. He did not have any prodigal habits, he brought in tons of money, and he hardly stayed home. She concluded that he was not as appalling as she had thought. He was just madly obsessed with wars. Wait, isn't that the same thing? Either way, Sylvia did not care. The Priatra Empire was safe thanks to his faithful endeavors in the front line. Not just safe, to be precise, this country was swallowing all its enemies. He had contributed greatly to the substantial expansion of the territory over the past 8 years. Where did you live? Victor asked about her past. Senoa, a very small village in the countryside. It should take 1 whole week from here, she answered casually. She had no reason to hide. She reckoned his mind would be full of war matters, and her hometown would be too trivial for him to remember. You've come a long way. Victor stopped gazing out the carriage window and looked at her. Why did you choose Aswan Castle? I didn't think you would come back so often. Why did you leave home? If not, I would have had to marry a bald, old bachelor. Is that all? To escape a marriage? He asked, raising his dark brows. It is not as simple as it sounds. It was a grave matter in which my life was at stake, she snapped and turned her head away sulkily. The story might have sounded silly, yes. But to her, it was a painful past. Sylvia would rather have died than stay in Senoa. If marriage to an old man was what awaited her at the end of an 18-year struggle against poverty, then life was being too hard on her. She heard a quiet laugh. Then I must try not to go bald. Or you might run away. Sylvia added one more line to her judgment. He was more mischievous than she had thought. When they both arrive at the mansion, one maid came running and told her that madam, someone came to meet you. Sylvia was startled because she had absolutely no idea who came. There is no one in the city she personally knew. She asked, who is asking for me? Who? I am not expecting anyone. Then suddenly a child's voice came Sylvia. That child came running and hugged Sylvia. Sylvia was startled to see Brianna, her stepsister. Sylvia's heart starting thumping. Why is she here? She thought. Brianna smirked and kept hugging her. Then another voice came. Hearing the familiar voice she was startled. Her stepmother also came. She spoke. We were so worried. You have no idea how much we missed you. Irritated Sylvia tried her best to keep herself calm and replied. There's no need to worry, stepmother. I have been very well. Her stepmother counterattacked. Sure. We've been told all about how you've been from your servants here. Sylvia replied, I see. Then there's no need for me to explain. She thought, I better quickly talk them out of here before they do anything stupid. Then suddenly Victor came and asked. Sylvia hesitates and replies, Duke, this is my stepmother and my stepsister. She thought now she is done for sure. She has got nowhere to run. Both mother and daughter didn't know that Duke was also in the mansion. They assumed that Duke wasn't on the battlefield. That's Victor Aswan. He instructs the maid, treat these two with respect. It happens to be time for lunch. Prepare lunch so we can eat together. Tell the chef to prepare the best dishes. Yes, Your Grace. Maid reply. Both of them were hiding behind Sylvia because they also knew that he is war maniac. After a while for lunch everyone gathered and the maid bought amazing dishes one by one. Stepmother thought, this guy, Victor Aswan, is totally different from the rumors. He doesn't look scary at all. Seems like those rumors were lies. By the way he's treating us, I can tell that he must be deeply in love with Sylvia. Sylvia started at her. She knew her stepmother was thinking something. Stepmother, she's planning something. Why is he so polite to them? It's so unlike him. Sylvia's stepmother opened her mouth and spoke. This really is a grand meal. Thank you for welcoming. Duke also replied, You're my wife's family. This is the least I can do. Sylvia's stepsister tried to get some food but her mother stopped her by slapping her hand. She spoke. But unfortunately, we cannot accept this meal. We came here to take our beloved Sylvia back. Sylvia was shocked at what her stepmother was saying. The room fell silent for a while. Finally, Sylvia opened her mouth and laughed nervously. She spoke. Stepmother, what are you? Before Sylvia can say something, her stepmother interferes. I may be her stepmother, but you have no idea how much I cared for her, so I wouldn't be called an evil stepmother. Look at her face. She pointed at Sylvia, and continued talking. She had a sheltered childhood. It's all because even when we had nothing, I still fed her meat. Hearing this, Victor laughed, because he already knew everything. The stepmother continues talking. That's why Brianna and I are still only living off of bad potatoes. Look, my poor Brianna is hungry all the time. Sylvia can't believe that she is hearing. What kind of crap is she making up? They had all the meat while I only had thin porridge and rotten potato. Hearing this, Victor gets annoyed. He opened his mouth and said, Is that so? He was holding the knife, then suddenly he stabs the meat like he is stabbing someone. Seeing Victor's behavior, the stepmother shivers in fear. He continued and spoke, Oh, that's very sad to hear. You must be starving. It's impressive you're holding yourselves back. Sylvia muttered, What terrible table manners. Her stepmother had goosebumps. Meanwhile, Brianna was thinking, it must be delicious. Sylvia was pissed off by everyone's behavior. What's he doing? Can't he read the room? Finally, Sylvia spoke. Mother, you've come a long way. Please join us. Brianna looks hungry as well. Our chef prepared these foods with great care, so please have some. We can always talk while we eat, right? Well, if you insist. The stepmother replies. Victor spoke, This is good food, so help yourselves. I've had plenty of bad potatoes out on the battlefield, so I too know what they're like. Sylvia thought, this man really. While drinking, Victor stopped and asked, I'm curious. Let me hear why you want to take her back. The stepmother has already prepared some acts. She continued, As I said earlier, I raised Sylvia as if she were my own daughter. You may be resting now, but the war isn't over yet. We don't know when you'll be leaving for war again. Think of Sylvia, who has to send you off to the battlefield. He grinned and spoke. I have a pretty good idea how she'd feel. He already knew how Sylvia would feel. Even Sylvia thought I would be super excited. But her stepmother again started babbling. Sylvia won't be able to sleep a wink because she'll be longing for your return. Meanwhile, Sylvia had another thought. I did lose some sleep fearing his return. Then again Victor said, You're right. I should try to come back sooner next time. She replied, What if you're unable to come back? Then who is going to be responsible for Sylvia's safety? Sylvia was shocked. She thought, What in the world is she thinking? Victor gets annoyed and speaks. You speak as though I'm going to die on the battlefield. She continued, well, you never know what'll happen in a war. God forbid, what would happen if Sylvia becomes a widow? As her mother, I can't just stand by and watch this unstable marriage go on. Sylvia was engaged to another man. We were always poor due to Sylvia's father's debt. And we didn't have a dowry for her wedding. But the man took pity on us and let the dowry slide. He also promised to look after us financially. And of course, he cherished Sylvia dearly. But what can I say when Sylvia is already married to you now? I'm happy as long as Sylvia stays happy and safe. And for that, she should stay with us. Sylvia knew her stepmother had planned something. Is she trying to get money? She continued, even if a situation were to arise where you won't be able to take care of her, surely you must be able to guarantee us financial security so that we'd be able to take care of Sylvia. If not, I would have no choice but to take her with me. Now Sylvia is visibly annoyed by her stepmother's action. I knew she was scheming something with all those shameless lies. She was after money all along. Victor then finally asks, so Sylvia, what's your opinion? I didn't hear your side of the story at all in this. All I get is that your mother is coddling you like a baby. Sylvia was puzzled and spoke, my opinion. Her stepmother shouts, Sylvia, answer wisely. If I don't comply with my stepmother, she's going to tell the truth. What should I do? But there's no way the Duke would pay them to keep me here. Then do I have to go back to that terrible place? I don't want to live like I'm sold off bald, to an old man. I don't want to go. I want to stay here. Her stepmother gets angry and shouts at Sylvia. Sylvia, how dare you disobey me? She grabbed Sylvia's hand and was about to hit her. But then Victor throws the knife. And everyone gets startled. In an angry tone Victor speaks, oh, I missed the shot. He then got up from his seat and said, I was just trying to kill a bug. Sylvia couldn't believe what he did. She muttered, what does he mean, a bug? The stepmother was startled and fell on the floor. He smirked and said, Sylvia chose to stay here, so don't worry too much. Although I don't know what kind of person that wealthy bald man is. How did you know he was bald? The stepmother was confused. She thought, did he know everything? Victor continued, it seems that Sylvia prefers me over him. Hearing Victor's words, Sylvia blushed and her heart started pounding. Victor then muttered, I guess I rested for too long. I can't even get a bug. It's a very lucky bug. Hearing his words, the stepmother flinched. And she started trembling in fear. Victor continued, I shall show it mercy this once. Of course, there won't be a next time. I should leave for the next battle soon to sharpen my skills again. That way, I won't miss it next time. He then walked towards the stepmother and bent on his knees. With a dangerous smile, he continued and asked, why are you shaking so much? Are you worried that I might die in the battle? Don't you worry. He grabbed her shoulder and said, I will wipe out the enemies and end the war before that happens. Then, Sylvia won't ever have to be lonely again. The stepmother, who was already trembling, now started shaking with fear. She got up and grabbed her daughter's hand and started running away from the mansion. Victor instructed the maid to see them off when they departed for home. All the maids went to see off them, but they ran so fast that they couldn't match their speed. When the maids came back, they told Sylvia, they ran so fast on their way out that they didn't even look back when we called out to them. Sylvia sighed and then spoke, yeah, they must have been very scared. She thought, maybe he was just offended that my stepmother was asking for money. But I think he was trying to help me. She started blushing while thinking about him. She thought how bold of him. It was just another sunny day. Sylvia was taking a walk along a pathway in the castle's grounds. This was an important part of her daily routine as she very much enjoyed walking. She beamed a warm smile to the servants who greeted her. Meanwhile, Victor was also out in the yard, inspecting his castle. The only difference was that he was on a horse. The big, black stallion made him appear even bigger and burlier. Why aren't you on a horse? He asked. Sylvia squinted under the blinding sunlight as she turned her eyes to Victor. It was hard to tell why he had asked. I don't know how to ride. I have never tried it. I will help you, he replied. Sylvia didn't know what to do. It was already too late to turn down the offer. If she did it now, she would only make matters worse. Sylvia nodded after a moment's hesitance. Oh, Sylvia's eyes widened. Victor placed her on the horse, holding her by the waist. Blushing, she cleared her throat and stole a glance at the Duke. This was what he had meant by help. It hit her again that he was a powerful man. Lifting her up didn't seem to burden him at all. Sylvia sat up straight to minimize physical contact with the Duke, who was now sitting behind her. This became harder and harder as time went by. The strain on her shoulders and back was uncomfortable, so she leaned backwards just a tiny bit. Victor was quiet, so she let the full weight of her body rest against his chest. Sylvia's eyes dropped to his hands, which were gripping the reins. The veins on the back of his large hands throbbed visibly. They were not as smooth as those of gentlemen. Rough with scars and calluses, his hands spoke to his hard work. Sylvia stared at them for a while, then looked up. The black stallion was quite docile. It trotted obediently, not blowing at all. Her first horseback ride turned out to be quite delightful. Why did I not think of learning this? She thought. It was a foolish question, in truth. Back in the countryside, she had always embroidered until late at night to support her step-family. Such luxury was not for an impoverished family like hers. Especially when they couldn't even afford carriage rides. The ride offered her a broader than usual view. The serene panorama of Aswan Castle unfolded before her eyes, freeing her spirit. A smile spread across her face. You are very lucky to see this peaceful landscape every day from atop your horse, she said. What I see on the horse is redder and fiercer. She had forgotten that he was a soldier. In the middle of a war, he should not have any leisure to canter on a horse. She became curious. Was he enjoying his time off, or was he doing her a favor? Indeed, Victor Aswan was not as bad as she had thought. Neither hot-tempered nor violent. Moreover, he did not do her any harm. She had always considered the possibility of being raped by him, for a brutal war fanatic must be craving for women. However, not once had he laid his hands on her while using the same bed. He was a barbaric man for sure, given his liking for hunting. Then was he mad about blood? It was hard to say. He wouldn't cut off someone's head just because he had been offended. He may have intimidated the servants with his blunt words, but not with his sword. Never. Sylvia finally understood his daily hunting schedule. He had no other business to attend in the castle. He didn't enjoy books or good food. Hunting was the only activity he could do to kill time. Not only that, but he had no friends. People couldn't be at ease in front of him. His men treated him courteously, but his subordinates could never be his close friends. That explained why he had gone out all by himself every time. Simply put, he had nothing else to do in the castle. She was able to picture how his life had been before they met. A lonely one, for sure. If people knew she felt pity for Victor Aswan, she would immediately be mocked and ridiculed. Regardless, she felt sorry for him. He was a man, capable of joking and offering favors. But to others, he was nothing but a mad slaughterer. The horse was able to take sight much further than she usually went. While they rested, Victor let the horse drink water, and Sylvia rolled up her skirt and put her feet in the stream. The water was satisfyingly cool. Then, out of the blue, the horse puffed air at her and ruined the mood completely. The obedient horse had sprayed water all over her when Victor was not paying attention. With a serious expression, Sylvia checked her dress. The dry, soft material was soaked. And the water that had caused this trouble had come from a horse's mouth. Victor let out a short laugh as Sylvia frowned. Stop laughing. Victor raised his brows to claim innocence and patted the horse's cheek a few times. Sylvia's eyes sharpened as Victor seemed to be complimenting the horse. She waited for an opportunity to splash water in his direction, and she took it. His eyes turned to meet hers, inquiring what she had just done. Was the horse, she said. Victor snorted and splashed back at her. Sylvia shrieked. She could not believe what he had done. This is so unfair. I only did it once, she cried out. I thought it was the horse, not you. I hope you know how petty a man you are, Your Grace, she said furiously. She splashed at him again, which initiated a serious water battle. Huffing irritably, she made her best effort. She didn't mind her wet dress. Scooping up as much water as her tiny hands could hold, she threw it towards Victor. Victor was even more earnest than her. He pushed down her shoulders and made her fall on her buttocks in the stream. This is so ungentlemanly. This was preposterous. Victor did not seem to feel guilty. His curved lips suggested that he was enjoying this moment to the fullest. This was unacceptable. She clasped his one leg and shoved the enormous man over, which caused a huge splash. Sylvia was soaked from head to toe. They burst into laughter at the silliness of the battle. Sylvia giggled, and Victor gave a small laugh. Both were as drenched as drowned rats. Sylvia came out of the stream, holding her dress. It was not easy to walk with the soaked skirt coiled around her legs. She squeezed the water out of it, during which she realized a pressing issue. Can I still ride a horse? Aren't I too wet? She regretted it even as the words were escaping her lips. Her look was extremely inappropriate. The wet dress clung to her body, openly exposing her figure. Her face turned red as she attempted to correct her mistake in a flurry. No, I meant, I did not mean for you to see. Victor approached her with big strides and looked down at her wet dress. She was supposed to stop him, but for some reason, no words came out. His face had already captivated her. He studied her very slowly. Sylvia noticed that his eyes had darkened, and that his expressionless face had been taken over by anxiety. Sensing a change in the air, she swallowed hard as he slowly reached his hand out to her. She did not stop him. He tucked her wet hair behind her ear. It was a simple act, but her heart was hammering already. She couldn't breathe. Something dangerous was about to happen. He lowered his head. His lips gently landed on the exposed ear, then moved smoothly down along her neck. She closed her eyes tightly. His hot lips moved at a painfully slow pace, branding her as they went. She whimpered. Her body rapidly heated up, and her stomach tightened with tension. Her legs quivered, and her lips let out a shallow breath. Aware of her response, Victor caressed her ear more intensely. Suddenly, he took her breasts in his big hands. Lightning flashed before her eyes. She threw her head back with a moan of pleasure. How beautiful, she thought, staring at the pink sky through blurry vision. Then she abruptly came back to her senses and saw with whom she was doing this. She pushed him away. I must return to the castle. To inspect the new sewing machine, she rambled, her voice trembling. She glanced at Victor and her heart sank. She saw his deep desire to have her. He placed her back on the horse without saying a thing. She was too nervous to breathe properly. Her heart raced because the person behind her, Victor Aswan, had become a man to her. What had happened earlier was utterly dangerous. Her breasts still burned from his touch. She thanked God that she was sitting in front of him, for this meant she could hide her glowing face. 1 month passed quickly. She realized that she had grown attached to him. Victor Aswan in armor did not look as horrible as he had at the beginning. Sylvia could not comprehend her feelings. She only cared about the castle and her safety, neither closely related to Victor's well-being. Consequently, she should be excited at his leaving, not depressed. The emotion was unfamiliar and awkward. Goodbye. Sylvia grasped the handkerchief firmly. Last time when he departed she didn't care about his return, but this time she made yellow handkerchief for Victor's well-being. She wished to say something more but couldn't and didn't. She feared she might ask him to stay. Are you not giving me a goodbye kiss? Victor asked calmly, before getting on his horse. Sylvia took a step closer toward him, and he smoothly drew her to him by her waist. The kiss was not as passionate as the last one, it was soft and tender, like a spring breeze. He kissed her cautiously, and she put her arms around his neck. A silly idea hit her. She wanted this moment to last forever. He departed eventually. Watching him go made her heart jolt. What if she couldn't see him again? The thought wiped out the fact that they were currently watched by numerous servants. She ran. Victor. Victor halted the horse. Panting, Sylvia looked up at him. "Promise me that you will come back," she said in a faltering voice. His inexpressive face cracked. "I will try," he murmured quietly. Sylvia stared absently as he disappeared into a dot. For the first time ever, she prayed for his safety. She should be happy if he could come back to his castle without a single wound. The vast castle was no longer a perfect place for her. She would be lonely living here by herself. Again, Victor returned home after another year on the battlefield. Sylvia's prayers must have been effective. He was back safe and sound. But not alone. Her mind stopped when he took a bundle of white cloth out of his armor. "Whose this child is?" "This is my child. Has been. And it is yours. Our child died last year. It came back to life." Sylvia looked down at the baby inside the white cloth. It was a newborn, its face still swollen. The poor little thing could barely open its eyes. She shouts, "I don't see any resemblance to me." Victor turns and answers, "Because it resembles me," which is even less likely. From the way he held the baby, she presumed he had never dealt with one before. As the crowding servants became more and more concerned about the baby, Sylvia had to order her maid to take it from him. Sylvia had no experience either. "His name is Jess," he spoke. Sylvia frowned. In the Empire, it was common enough for fathers to name their children, but how could he do so without asking her opinion? Then how come he hadn't named their baby? The fact that their baby had never existed to begin with did not help her in getting over the nagging feeling that her baby's name was stolen. Jess could have been her baby's name. Having been too baffled to process the situation earlier, she restored her inner calm and dwelled on the news more carefully now, which made her feel worse. A bastard child. It was an insult. He must have had too much time on the battlefield. She understood that men could long for women's sweet, warm bosom during war, but how could he? She was at a loss for words. She may have pursued some extravagance during her stay here, but never an affair. On the other hand, this man had brought home another woman's baby and handed him to her. Without any sort of apology. This incident would significantly diminish her authority within the castle. The servants would call her the poor Duchess, and question the Duke's love or speculate that his love had faded. She wanted respect, not pity. She had planned to be a good wife once he returned. Not that she would have given him an enthusiastic welcome, but perhaps some effort to maintain an amicable relationship as housemates. However, the plan could not hold if this was how he would treat her. She would be a fool to strive alone. Exasperated, she said nothing. "Take a look at the baby," Victor said, tapping her arm. "No," she snapped, which she regretted a second later as she sounded like a jealous wife. Or a mean old stepmother who mistreated her husband's illegitimate child. The last thing she wanted was to act like her own stepmother. So she held back her anger. "I don't even take a look at books," she explained. Victor looked at her. Feeling guilty for some reason, Sylvia added, "I refuse to look at the baby not because I don't care for him. It's just too inconvenient." "That's a lazy thing to say," he replied. She continued, "What would be the point in doing so? He won't remember me. He can't even open his eyes yet. I will look after him when he is old enough to recognize people." Victor nodded and made no further demands. Thinking that he at least had some conscience left to stop there, she darted out of the room so as not to punch him in his shameless face. Sylvia was pacing her room in anger. This was betrayal, a critical fault that could have ended their tacit partnership. He could not do this to her. If he were to sleep with other women, why did he kiss her? She felt tears in her eyes. Why did he let her stay in the castle in the first place? Why did he let her pose as his wife if this was how he would treat her? He was the most dreadful man she'd ever met. And thinking of his mistress made her gnash her teeth in anger. How dare she sleep with that brute of a man? I will never open my heart to that cruel man. At that moment, a fundamental question crossed her mind. Where is the mother of the baby? Victor had not brought her to the castle. Any woman who gave birth to his child would fight her way into the castle as his mistress, or worse, as his wife. For that was the reasonable reward. That Victor had returned alone meant she may have died. Died of natural cause. Or killed due to a rapacious demand. The latter gave her gooseflesh all over. Regardless, he was a cold-blooded man. Sylvia hardened her heart against him. It was clear now, taking pity on him was a huge waste of energy. Sylvia began to give him the cold shoulder. She ignored his gaze and avoided any possibility of bumping into him in the castle by taking a different path whenever she spotted him. Not that she wanted to appear to be a jealous wife, but her rage was out of control. She could not bear the sight of him. Using the same bed every night was hell. She went to bed early so he could not initiate a conversation. She would place herself at the farthest end of the bed and turn her back to him. Sadly, he didn't seem to care at all. He just took up more than half of the giant bed. She had clearly failed in getting her feelings across. The lack of response only fueled her displeasure. It was only a few days ago that she had prayed for his safety. Now she wanted him gone. Why had she ever cared about him? She had been such an idiot. He had been fooling around with other women while she was praying for him. This was unfair. She was only 20 years old, much too young to be a mother. Of course, women in the countryside had 2 or 3 children at the age of 18, but not her. She was a virgin, and Victor had turned her into the mother of a child that wasn't even hers. How could he force a virgin to raise somebody else's child? How did you make the baby? Sylvia asked. Victor, lying on his back on the bed, winced at the sharpness in her voice. What do you mean, how? He asked, snorting. Is that even a question? He mumbled as he rolled to turn his back to her. Sylvia's eyes narrowed as he seemed to be dodging her question. She turned around and shot an angry glance at his back. She hated that hard, broad back. She had to give vent to her mounting anger in some way. Hence, the slap to his back. Victor jumped at the sudden attack, rolling over with a frightful expression on his face. What is the matter? What do you think is the matter? Sylvia did not avert her eyes. She had no intention of backing down, no matter how furious he looked. She had been willing to tolerate some insult as a self-invited guest of the castle, but not this. This was crossing the line. Because you made a child outside the home. So, I do not care for it. I am asking why not. Good Lord, have you no empathy? Sylvia rapped his chest with her fists. Victor's jaw tightened. Seriously, what has gotten into you today? Let's say, while you were gone, I made love to another man, conceived a child, and said that it was yours. How would you feel? You already did. He was right. She had done exactly that already. She had created a fictional child and insisted that it was Victor's. She recalled his response. Although he had mocked her, saying she must give birth to the baby, he hadn't used her excuse to give her a hard time. I see. Sylvia rolled over on her side, with a guilty smile on her face. She had indeed been overreacting. That was not a pleasant experience, Victor mumbled, just when Sylvia was about to fall asleep. She began to have doubts. Was he saying he made a baby on purpose? So he could avenge himself on her for what she had done? Her anger erupted at last. It was beyond belief that he had made this much effort for the sole purpose of stabbing her. In the back, her face turned scarlet. Perhaps it was the wine she had had before bed. She jumped on his stomach and grabbed him by his collar. Do you mean this was all intentional? She snarled, grinding her teeth. She was burning with blind rage. Why would I? Victor yelled, half insane. Then whose child is he? As I said, he is my child. Who is the mother? Why are you obsessed with his background? Because, Sylvia suddenly choked up. Her eyes clouded. He raised his brows in indifference, still not understanding what the problem was. Sylvia's eyes began to brim with tears. She hated Victor for making her spell it out. It bothers me that you might replace me with another woman, she said. Sylvia broke down in tears, and Victor was embarrassed. After a long pause, he said calmly, I found him in the streets. He reminded me of my childhood. I see. Sylvia stopped crying, relieved that he had not been having an affair. She relaxed her head on his neck and let out a sigh. You could have said so from the beginning. After a brief pause, Victor patted her on the back. She calmed herself in his arms for a while, inhaling his aroma. Suddenly, it struck her that it was late at night and they were on the bed. She began to grow conscious that his arms were wrapped around her body. His body was hot and hard. Sylvia rose awkwardly and swallowed as their eyes locked. His eyes had darkened. She said, wriggling her fingers on his chest. Just as Sylvia rolled her eyes to come up with an excuse, Victor urgently tugged her neck down toward him. Their lips met, and it blew Sylvia's mind as if she had been stung by a bee. Her heart was racing, or faster than racing if that were possible. Victor hungrily captured her soft lips with his. The kiss was smothering her, but she didn't want him to stop. She responded enthusiastically. The long kiss was over, and Sylvia struggled to catch her breath, during which she peered at Victor and blushed. His hair was disheveled, and his fleshy lips were shiny with her saliva. The dazed eyes beneath his dark brows took on an obscene look. Sylvia twitched as something nudged her bottom. She did not see for herself as she knew very well what that was. She became shy and glad at the same time, as it was a sign of his desire. Sylvia, he called her with a hoarse voice. She shuddered. She could not turn her eyes from him. He stroked her back gently, his lustful touch arousing an erotic sensation within her. She stopped hesitating. The daring move made Victor freeze, and she was satisfied to see the power of her action. With a smile, she continued to run her hands over his chest. This was her first time to touch a man's chest. It was hard, taut and elastic, as if the skin were pulled hard from either side. She caressed him carefully. Flinching at her touch, Victor caught her by the waist impatiently and whirled over to place her under him. Sylvia's eyes widened in surprise. I want to have you, he said, looking down at her with his darkened eyes. The burning desire colored her cheeks. I want to have you, too, she whispered coyly. Victor's breathing grew rough, his chest moving wildly. He slid his fingers under her skirt and began touching her. She flinched. Victor teased her that he barely did anything and she was wet already. She was holding her moan, but Victor said, "Don't hold back, I want to hear you moan." Hearing his words, she can't hold back her moan any longer. Hearing her voice, Victor became even more enthusiastic. The sensation of Victor's rough finger gave her such pleasure that she had never imagined. She wants him to touch her even more. He again teased her and spoke. My fingers, they're going in so easily. How many more do you think I can fit in there? Sylvia became shy and said, don't say things like that. But Victor didn't stop. He shoved his fingers even deeper and asked, how does it feel when I do this? Sylvia's whole body started shaking. Then finally Victor removes his nightgown and also helps Sylvia to remove her nightgown too. He then whispered, Sylvia, you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. He kissed her and then started kissing her body. The sensation of Victor's tongue made her weak in pleasure. He licked and sucked her. Sylvia was feeling good, but at the same time, she was embarrassed. But Victor didn't stop at all. He licked and sucked her like there is no tomorrow. Then finally he leaned on her bottom, but Sylvia was too embarrassed by his action. She called his name, Victor, please stop. But he replied, you are calling my name. Now I want to tease you even more. So I can't stop, Sylvia. She was too embarrassed by Victor's action. Victor didn't stop, he sucked her like a beast. Meanwhile, Sylvia was feeling a mixed sensation. She then said, it hurts, Victor, please stop, it hurts. I can't take it anymore. But then Victor gets up and smirks. He grabbed her by her waist and started hammering her. She wasn't sure how to feel, but finally, her feelings for Victor made her feel great. He hammered her with all his strength. She couldn't imagine he was inside her. He then spoke, you need to see your face, which indulges in pleasure. He was using all his strength and kept going on harder and harder. Sylvia also followed his rhythm. Her mind went blank with his every moment. He muttered, you are driving me crazy, Sylvia, I can't stop. He kept driving her crazy. He muttered, "You are doing amazing, Sylvia." Flop! Screaming and moaning kept happening the whole night. They both were lost in each other's warmth. In the morning Sylvia can't believe what happened last night. She never thought she could do such things with none other than Victor. While she was lost in thoughts, Victor whispered her name in her ears. She was shocked. He said, "I called you several times but you didn't reply. Where were you lost?" She replied, "Nothing." Aswan Castle was located far from the imperial palace, practically abandoned in the middle of nowhere. It was, however, a perfect place for Sylvia, and the geographical isolation precluded her engagement with other nobles. "Until now, we have a ball at the palace to attend," Victor told Sylvia. She was reluctant, though not because of her false identity. She had grown up in the countryside with commoners and had never been a debutante. No one at the ball would recognize her. Rather, it was the socializing part that troubled her. She would have to chat away with the snobbish nobles. She had no fantasy whatsoever about the capital. She preferred a peaceful life. The occasional trip downtown was more than enough. The palace. That is quite far. She sounded uninterested. It won't take long by carriage. Come with me. Long trips make me nauseous. Take a book with you. I know books make you fall asleep at once. Sylvia puffed her cheeks in protest, but Victor was unyielding. He had been perfectly fine having an audience with the emperor alone, and all of a sudden, he needed her at the palace. She sensed that he was not offering a favor of showing her around the city. It sounded more like she was the solution to whatever problem he had. She was correct. His Majesty believes I need a woman. Every night, a woman stranger awaits me in bed. Sylvia thought long and hard and accepted his proposal. She needed to accompany him on this tiresome trip. Never would she let another woman lie next to this man under her watch. Before she knew it, she was claiming her exclusive right to a property she would never share with others. In addition, she could not forever turn a blind eye to her debut if she were to remain Victor's wife no matter how stressful. And she had little time to quit in the near future. "Jess will also come with us." "Why?" "To show that I have a boy. His Majesty only believes what he sees." Sylvia could picture the shocking news spreading like wildfire, beyond the vicinity of Aswan Castle, across the whole empire. That Victor Aswan had taken a wife, with whom he had a boy. The nobles would definitely be stupefied. On the day of the ball Sylvia dresses up gorgeously. Her maids even praised her. She was sure she could handle everything. When she went to the hall, she saw Victor dressed up like a proper gentleman. For a moment she can't think he is the same Victor because he looked so handsome. Then he suddenly spoke. "It seems like you're so pleased that you're speechless." Hearing this, Sylvia came back to her senses. He continued, "You said you didn't want to go, but you look pretty excited." She thought, what he's talking about. He then came closer to her and gently touched her face and spoke, "You are beautiful, Sylvia." Hearing Victor's words, Sylvia was pleased. Then finally they went for the ball. "The ball is going to be boring," said Victor out of the blue in the carriage. "I can't say they are the politest people." Sylvia understood his warning. The arrogant nobles did not appreciate him. He was not fitted in the capital. While he fought on the front lines to protect his homeland, those people nicknamed him not as a war hero but as a war fanatic, a slaughterer. No member of the nobility in his or her right mind would try to be on intimate terms with Victor, around whom all sorts of malicious rumors whirled. "I'm fine. You were not polite to me either. I am well trained." Victor chuckled at her humorous rejoinder. Sylvia's goal was to obtain proper recognition from the nobles on behalf of Victor. She was determined and confident as she was an eloquent speaker and had an excellent assistant, Jess. The sweet, lovely baby was sure to win the noblewomen's favor. She observed the baby sleeping soundly in her arms. He coped well with the new environment in which he had to live with his stepparents. He never lost his adorable smile. Sylvia was never fond of children, but his cute mannerisms were irresistible. When Victor, Sylvia and Jess arrived at the ball, Sylvia thought everyone would be stunned to see how handsome Victor is. He isn't just war maniac. But when their name was announced, it seems like no one cared about the hero who protected their empire. Seeing the atmosphere of the ball, Sylvia was pissed off. But Victor excused and said he will go to the restroom and will take a nap. Sylvia shouts, "What?" He continued with a dull expression. "If I'm around, nobody will talk to you. Are you okay with that?" She thought. He was trying to seem indifferent, but he actually cares a lot about me. Poor Victor. Then Sylvia speaks. "Just trust me, Victor. Have a nice nap, and don't worry about a thing." Victor felt a little embarrassed. It feels like she's cheering for me. Victor went to the restroom and Sylvia took a seat. Both Sylvia and Jess were seated peacefully. Then suddenly a lady came. An old gray-haired lady peeked into the stroller in delight. How adorable. Sleeping so well, and not whining at all. He is such a good boy, never bothers his mother. Sylvia covered her mouth and smiled. The ladies at different tables whispered with each other, looking furtively at Sylvia. Sylvia smiled even more brightly whenever she caught their eyes. Her favorable disposition confused them. In the end, one lady spoke on behalf of everybody, "That child." Sylvia listened attentively, maintaining a warm smile on her face, which gave the lady the courage to finish her sentence. "Whose child is he, Your Grace?" Sylvia was dismayed. Good Lord. She may have doubts, but to ask that to my face. Yet, she managed to hide her shock and kindly answer the question. She was good at wearing masks. "You must have missed my introduction earlier. My name is Sylvia Aswan, which would make Duke Victor Aswan my husband. And this is my son, Jess." The perfectly fine answer shook up every single person in the room. Then the lady spoke. "You don't mean he is that man's child?" One of them asked incredulously. Another lady interfered. "Did you really give birth to that man's child?" Sylvia was pissed off. They were all referring to Victor as that man, which irritated Sylvia a great deal. They sounded absolutely absurd, acting as if his name were a curse. Victor had been bestowed with the title of Lord in recognition of his retaking some territory. He deserved respect, for he was a duke of this very empire. These aristocrats refused to accept that, expressing disdain for his lack of official training from the imperial knights or hereditary nobility. "Is that the child of Duke Aswan?" They failed to conceal the contempt and disgust in their eyes, but it did not affect Sylvia's smile. "Exactly. This boy is the one and only son of Duke Aswan. Do come and take a closer look. See for yourself how lovely he is," she said. The old lady threw a helping word as she herself had already fallen in love with Jess Little Dimples. "Yes, you must. He is the most beautiful baby I have seen lately. I presume he will grow up to be a handsome gentleman." Other ladies approached with caution, as if they were coming only because Sylvia had urged them. Eventually, Jess' radiant smile melted away their cold, icy wall, and his sparkling green eyes that resembled a fresh forest made it impossible for them to suppress any longer their exclamations of delight. By no means did Sylvia and Jess remind them of war or murder. Sylvia was a caring mother, and Jess was an angel from heaven. Then suddenly one lady spoke. "This is between ladies. Doesn't he make you bleed in bed?" One lady suddenly fired an arrow at Sylvia. The lady nervously continued in a low voice, "I suspect he is brutal in bed, am I not right? You might beg him to stop, but I'm sure he doesn't listen. Because his own desire comes first, and he doesn't treat people as humans." The rest of the ladies broke their silence and joined in. "Because he is a ruthless man who slices people like meat. He has spent almost 10 years on the bloody battlefield. Thousands of ghosts must trail in his wake. How frightening." They shivered in fear. Sylvia tried not to frown. The way they framed him as an inconsiderate man infuriated her. Still, she could not destroy the relationships that she had worked so hard to build. She curled up her lips instead. "I'm fine. You do not need to hide. Everyone in the empire knows what kind of a man he is." "Oh, you poor..." A woman with teary eyes held Sylvia's hands tightly. "I do not know how you ended up marrying such a dreadful person, but I am here to support you, as a woman. If you cannot stand it any longer, please contact me. My cousin is a lawyer in the capital." They made a great fuss, as though Sylvia were a victim of domestic violence. Sylvia found it hard to describe her feelings. In this big room, with this many people, she felt she was all alone on a remote island. In spite of all that, she kept her smile and checked on Jess in the stroller. Wrinkling her nose, she put on an act of being embarrassed. The ladies exchanged looks and nodded. They sat around Sylvia. Obviously, not all of them had opened up to her. While the majority pitied Sylvia, 3 pompous ladies remained in their seats and whispered into each other's ears. Lady spoke. Is there really something? Please tell me. Sylvia then made a distressed face and spoke. Something is troubling me. Where should I start? Go on, please, and tell us. He continued. I'm sure you'll soon hear the rumors about how Victor and I met. So, I won't dwell on that. Just between us girls, Victor has an unexpected charm. I read about it in some book, and it said that kind of behavior was called being dominant during the day and submissive at night. Hearing this, all ladies flinched. One lady was about to say something, but Sylvia put her finger on her lips and said the details are a secret. When he was leaving the castle, he was worried that harm would come to my body. He warned everyone in the mansion that, if anything happened to me, he would kill them. He worries too much. What do you think? It's pretty, right? This was what he gifted me after beheading several of our enemies. Honestly, he gives me everything I want. It's so troublesome. I know he comes off as being a little rough, but he goes to war to protect me and everyone else. He's only harsh on the outside because protecting something is a difficult task. I get why you all would misunderstand. But he truly treasures and loves me. I'm also completely smitten with him. Then the ladies muttered. Maybe Sylvia is right. It seems like even a horrible person is capable of love. Sylvia thought. They're reacting well to the romantic story I told. Of course, I did exaggerate a bit. I can't stop here now. With teary eyes, she continued her act. I'm so glad we sorted out that misunderstanding. I don't mean to be dramatic. If Victor sees me crying, there's no knowing what he'll do. He treats the servants so severely. But I don't want you ladies to harbor more misunderstandings. Hearing this, all ladies flinched. Sylvia thought, if you start spreading rumors, you'll end up like that chatty lord. She grabbed one lady's hands and continued. I don't want what happened to that lord to happen again. You'll help me, right? Nervously the lady spoke. Oh ho. Yes, of course. Sylvia spoke. What a relief. All we need now is for the war to end. I've memorized your faces. I'll remember all of you and invite you to the castle. I just have to introduce you to the Duke. Victor will come to know all your faces too. The other 7 ladies asked about Sylvia's background, which was a cue for Sylvia to use her natural-born talent and concoct a story. I grew up in Rubia. Rubia was once a territory of the Priatra Empire, but it had been annexed by Luya for decades until it was recently recovered by Victor. The conflict between the 2 empires over this fertile land was ongoing. Do you mean you are of Priatran heritage, Your Grace? Exactly. My parents are both Priatrans. Not a single drop of Rubian blood runs in our family. That explains your fluency in Priatran. Yes, my parents always instructed me to use Priatran, as one who forgets her mother tongue shall forget her roots. Her smooth answers and sweet smile quickly disarmed the ladies. From then on, Sylvia was able to join the conversation freely. Their topic moved on to the latest scandals in high society. Have you heard? Lord Dustman proposed marriage to Lady Sebira. I heard that Duke Sebira delivered an ultimatum to Earl Dustman. He would challenge him to a duel if the proposal did not arrive by this month, which is only reasonable. What kind of a father would sit by and watch his beloved only daughter abandoned by the bastard that stole her virginity? Moreover, Lady Sebira is only 17. Oh, is he settling down at last? I assume there are a great many victims of his promiscuity. Definitely she is not the only one. What's worse, he has mistresses, too, and one of them is a prostitute who gave birth to his child. He is said to be wild about women. I heard he once slept with 2 women at the same time. Disgusting. What repulsive manners he has. Without losing her smile, Sylvia listened carefully to the latest chatter. Well, she pretended to listen. Then finally Jess cried. Sylvia saw this as an opportunity and excused herself. She couldn't be less interested in the scandals of high society. All that occupied her mind were her dresses, shoes, necklaces, and other items that she had left at the castle and Victor, waiting for her in their room. Victor had told her he would take a nap. Sylvia pouted at the time, disappointed that he was too lazy to accompany her when he was the one who had brought her to the ball. She then understood. He must have had his own issues to attend to. In the capital, his handsome face was not as effective as it had been back in his territory. Nobody looked closely enough at his face, and the moment his name was called, people scattered. It was an embarrassing moment for Sylvia. Meanwhile, Victor looked calm on the outside, but she assumed he must have felt bitter on the inside. She was sorry for him. Victor was a good man. He had good manners with women. He gave shoes as a gift, helped her to ride, and he picked roses for her. He had not taken revenge when she had slapped his back. He had never used violence against her, not even as a joke. He was not a bad person as they described. He did not prioritize his desires in bed, it was hers that came first. He was delicate. His careful touches always made her blush. He was far more gentlemanly than their fat, bald husbands. They don't even know him. Sylvia could not control herself. The way they looked at her made her blood boil. She did not care for pity, but misjudging Victor as human trash was far more intolerable. The disdainful treatment broke her heart. Victor hadn't attended any parties and had stayed in bed, well aware of the widespread perception of him within aristocratic circles despite him holding the highest title outside of royalty. It was not his fault that he had taken so many lives. Someone had to die in wars. It was either him or them. Sylvia was upset that people had unjustly labeled him a slaughterer when his actions were perfectly normal on the battlefield. Watching Sylvia pace back and forth in irritation, Victor remarked, "I suppose the conversation did not go well." "Yes, it was a complete waste of time." "What offended you?" "This society is filled with idiots and fools. They think they are so smart, that they know the truth of everything, but all they talk about is nonsense. For example, they called you a barbarian who slices human flesh like meat." "Which is true," Victor said, adding that that was his job. Sylvia stopped on the spot, incredulous. "Are you seriously telling me you like killing people?" She scowled. He didn't answer. His eyes were trained on Sylvia. "I said, do you go to war because you like flying limbs and spattering blood?" Sylvia grabbed her dress and jumped in frustration. "You don't. I know you don't." Victor had stayed on the battlefield for several consecutive years not because he liked war. It was the exact opposite. He had wanted to put an end to the war as soon as possible. Wars last until one side surrenders. Defeating the enemy is the best way to prevent any permanent damage. They are terrible. Don't they know who is ensuring this peace? Victor did not seem to mind such spiteful rumors about him, as if he had already grown used to such treatment. She became sad, thinking that this could have been his life all along. She burst into tears. Victor got out of bed, startled. "I am so mad that they don't know who you really are," she wept, covering her face with her hands. "You fight for the peace of this empire. You should be called a hero, not a monster. Why do they hate you when they don't know a thing about you? You deserve so much more than this." "Thank you for putting it that way," Victor patted her back. She cried in his arms. "Of course, you are cruel and barbaric, that's true. But I am the only one who can speak ill of you. You are the head of this household, and a wonderful person." "Sylvia," Victor said in a soft tone, which broke her heart once again. "See, even his voice is gentle. He's not bad at all. Thank you for caring about me, but I am not as good as you think. They do have a point about my inhumanity. I have too much blood on my hands, and with these, taking lives is all I'm capable of." "No," Sylvia contradicted him firmly. She placed her hand on his cheek and, with red, tearful eyes, said, "You make me happy. These hands bring me flowers, tie my hair, and hold my shoulders. These hands are good hands. They do things to please me. Too, others may point a finger at you, but do not care about them. Because I am proud of you. So please, never disparage yourself. You are an incredible man who deserves respect. You are my hero, Sylvia. Victor seemed overwhelmed with emotion. His mouth remained shut for quite a while, but his blue eyes had a dangerous glint in them. Sylvia hoped that he wouldn't get hurt in the future. That she could bear all the scars for him and embrace his broken heart. She took in every feature of his face. He was beautiful. How can they possibly accuse this beautiful man of being a merciless war maniac? Her heart ached. Victor wiped the tears rolling down from her eyes. The rough, calloused thumb felt smoother than delicate silk. Victor smirked. Haven't you missed the biggest pleasure? Sylvia giggled. I thought you liked this, he said, his hand cupping her plump buttocks beneath her dress. What are you doing? She said, lightly punching him with a smile. If you have to ask, I'm not doing my job well. The hand stopped kneading her buttocks and snuck into her secret folds. He removed her dress and asked to take a bath together. She moaned reflexively as his touches became more seductive. She whispered with hesitance, Victor, not here. Jess might wake up. He won't, as long as you stay quiet. Still, not here. Let's go to the bathroom then. Victor turned the tap on in the bathroom. Hot water poured out, filling the room with hot steam. Sylvia was not sure if the heat in the bathroom was the hot water, or their lust. Her lower stomach began to tighten in anticipation. Desire had already turned his blue eyes a darker shade. He stripped her skillfully. The heavily embellished lace dress dropped to the floor, leaving only the undergarment on her body. As he saw her silhouette through the thin chemise, he breathed heavily. Every single time, he was mesmerized by her body. Let's bathe together, he whispered. He pulled down her panties, brushing between her legs intentionally. She began to blush. His hands roamed over her body as if it were his. Liking it, Sylvia let him do his work. It's already wet down here, he said in a gravelly voice. I'll have to see whether it needs to be cleaned. Victor sat her on the edge of the bathtub and kneeled in front of her. Her eyes had become drowsy. Victor Aswan, the war maniac, was on his knees in front of a woman. No one in the Empire would have imagined this possible. Feeling somewhat dominant, she ran her fingers through his black hair. She hadn't fully overcome the embarrassment of exposing herself to him, but she didn't want to refuse the pleasure that he was about to offer. She allowed him to spread her legs wide. Then they went onto the bathtub together. Victor teased Sylvia for a while. Then they started their night program. Victor was in the heart, mind and body just wanted Sylvia. Seeing Victor so passionate, she can't stop him. They both make out the whole night in the bathtub. Then they shifted to a nearby table, and again started their program. In the morning, Victor wakes up early before Sylvia. She asked, "Where are you going?" He said they both didn't attend the ball, so the Emperor wants to have an audience with him. And he also has something to report to the Emperor. She asks if needed she can also go with him. He refused and suggested her to take rest because what they did last night was hard on her body. Sylvia finally agreed and Victor went to see the Emperor. Sylvia put the bottle in Jess' mouth. He sucked the milk, his eyes settled on Sylvia. She watched him drink, warm affection in her eyes. You are beautiful. Throughout Sylvia's life, she had always had someone to look after. So when she left home, she had made one resolution. I will now live for myself and live my life to the fullest. It was Jess who had weakened her resolve. Child rearing did not seem so bad after all, as taking care of Jess never tired her. If she were to have a sweet little baby like Jess, she might consider bearing the pain of labor. A child with Victor. Sylvia imagined how the baby would look if they were to have one. Victor had black hair and blue eyes. She had blonde hair and brown eyes. While going through each of the combinations, Sylvia was surprised by how her imagination was running wild. Do I want to have his child? She felt odd as she pictured herself with a baby bump. She had never considered this a possibility until recently. Having an Aswan child was never part of her plan. But things had changed. Sylvia's cheeks turned rosy at the thought of Victor. Just a few hours ago, she had been in his arms, screaming until she became hoarse. If this continued, she might have a baby anytime soon. It was not a bad idea to have a child with him. The problem was the situation he was in. She assumed that he would leave the castle again. The war was not over yet, and the emperor would certainly send the greatest commander of his empire back to war. Sylvia let out a heavy sigh. Moreover, pregnancy would be just one of many problems. What if she went into labor while he was gone? She could easily predict that it would be incredibly lonely and sad. Sylvia now hated the emperor for constantly exploiting Victor. How unfair that one person lives a comfortable life in a palace while the other risks his life at war. She poured curses on an emperor she had never met. Victor's audience with the emperor had been prolonged. It was impossible to go to sleep knowing that the emperor might order Victor back to the battlefield. I've come to quite like him now. How can I say goodbye? The image of an enemy arrow piercing Victor threw her into panic. One nail-biting hour passed, and Victor finally came home. How did it go? She asked, but he stalled from answering, his face unreadable. Something did not seem right. Her heart sank with a loud thud. I guess you must leave again, she said, utterly depressed. No, Victor shook his head with a laugh. Our opponents have sent us a written surrender in their king's name. Surrender, also translated as, Victor Aswan does not have to go to war anymore. Sylvia was struck dumb. Had she understood correctly? Really? Oh, Sylvia cried out and hopped into his arms. Thank you, Lord. You can't imagine how tremendously worried I was to be sending you off again. Oh, this is wonderful news. I'm not done yet. Victor held out his hand and gave her a piece of paper he had been hiding behind his back. It read, I hereby permit the marriage of Miss Sylvia Lauren and Duke Victor Aswan. And below the text was the Emperor's seal. Sylvia's eyes widened. Sylvia, will you marry me? Her mind went blank. He is proposing to me. Sylvia would no longer be a fake bride but the true wife of Duke Victor Aswan. With permission from the Emperor. Feeling a surge of emotions, she covered her mouth. Scalding hot tears poured down her cheeks. We must have a magnificent wedding. To show the whole world you are my wife. Victor's proposal was the greatest thing that had happened in her 20 years of life. Yes, yes, of course, she said, still crying. Victor Aswan would not leave for war anymore. And they would now stay together forever as husband and wife. Everything had turned out unbelievably well. Victor's thick lips curled in a smile, and his blue eyes were filled with pride and happiness. I love you, Sylvia, Victor whispered in her ear. She felt an overflowing joy rising from deep down, which made her realize that all this time, she, too, had been in love with this man, Victor Aswan. I love you, too, Victor. Then she sprinkled him with her most heartfelt kisses. Duke Aswan's wedding at the capital square was grand indeed, attended even by the emperor himself. Sylvia was astonished when she met the emperor. He was not the bad-tempered man she had pictured in her head. Rather, he was handsome and had a vibrant personality which didn't make any difference in her judgment, though. He was the very reason Victor had to fight in war after war. She put on a gracious smile and cursed him fiercely on the inside, sincerely hoping his carriage would roll over on his way back. But he looks more approachable than I had expected. Emperor approached Sylvia, leaned on and said, I can't believe you were hiding such a beautiful wife. You have so many secrets. I feel let down. Victor spoke. It's my personal life. The emperor whispered to Sylvia. Madam, for the longest time, I thought he had no interest in women. If that wasn't it, I thought he had no intention to marry. Victor spoke. This is exactly why I kept her hidden away. Emperor continued. Don't be like that. Ha ha. I felt very emotional when he came to get my permission to marry. Hearing this, Sylvia became curious. She asked, oh my, how did it go? Emperor continued, it was quite a sight. I've never seen the Duke make that kind of expression before. You should have seen how sincere he looked. Ha ha ha, I never imagined this day would come. Seeing him like that made me not want to stamp the marriage certificate. Sylvia now remembers what happened on that day. So that's why he was late that day. Aside from her small spite toward the emperor, Sylvia was a benevolent and caring person. And she had become even more generous since receiving the title of Duchess. They say generosity comes from an abundant harvest. Ever since Victor's assets had officially become hers, she had found peace and comfort in her life, offering more favors to those who came begging. Her newlywed life was perfect. With Victor permanently at the castle, she was able to indulge in the sweet life of a married couple. He taught her how to ride a horse and shoot an arrow. In turn, Sylvia taught him embroidery. She wanted Victor to develop a new hobby. He complained but never threw away the embroidery frame. And thus how they live happily ever after. Thank you for tuning in to watch this season unfold. Your support means the world to us. We're excited to continue the journey with you in the next story. Until then, take care and stay tuned for what's to come.